Hello and welcome to the back to the channel here, where we're back with another GAA episode. Gaelic Football Championship coming up this weekend. I'm joined again by Conor McKenna, who he's going to bring all the knowledge to the video. So thanks for joining me again, Conor. And this week we have in the football we should have had 10 games, but I think we're going to have 9. So, but we'll start off anyway. We'll start off with your home championship and go to Leinster, where your boys are taking on the mighty Dubs. Is there any chance of a bloody nose for the Dubs?
I don't know, Gerry. It's a hard question. I think Dublin are probably a bit of an unknown quantity. Like, people seem to think that they're not going to win this All Ireland, and it's kind of seems to be forgotten that they've won the last 5, kind of, and they've won 6 of the last 7, and they've won them fairly well. They haven't won them fairly comfortably, but they've always been okay, maybe until the latter stages. The record in the Leinster Championship has been very, very, very good in recent years. They've won games at their absolute ease, but like, they're going playing Westmeath this weekend. Look, they'll be hoping to win that game with minimal fuss, but it's one of those games, Gerry, where Dublin have absolutely everything to lose from the game, because like, there's no pressure on Westmeath. I think the season for Westmeath is very straightforward. It was basically the main goal for Westmeath this season was surviving in Division 2. They managed to survive in Division 2, so that was done, and then anything else really was a bonus after that. So I think maybe like this would never be said publicly, obviously, but I don't think they ever thought they were going to beat Dublin. So they probably might have focused on getting to the qualifiers. If they were relegated, they would have been in that Tailteann Cup. They wouldn't have wanted to have been there. So I think that the Westmeath's focus maybe was to stay up in Division 2, and then anything else really was a bonus. They managed to stay up in Division 2. The Dublin, on the other hand, anything less than an All-Ireland title will be a bad season for them. In the league, people might think they're not going that strong in the league, but they still picked up 10 points. Like they won 4 games, and they would have drawn. Well, they have 10 points. I think they won 4 and drew 2 games, and they lost 1 against Tyrone in very bad conditions. So Dublin didn't have a bad league by any means. Like, in other years, they would have been in the league final. I think they finished 2nd in the league. Even since the lockdown, they have won their 2 games, and they would have been expected to beat Meath comfortably in recent years. I think the fact Meath kind of ran them close to within 4 points in Parnell Park is maybe what's given the doubters maybe saying they've chance. Now, Meath, it's hard to know like what level Westmeath are at as well. They had a very, very good win against Laois and didn't play so great against Kildare. But I'd say Dublin will, like, Dublin are under a lot of pressure. So I'd say, like, if they don't win this game by at least 10 or 15 points, then people might be asking questions: are Dublin there to be taken, or are they vulnerable? So I think Dublin will win the game fairly comfortably. It'll be interesting to see how Westmeath set up. Will they set up in a very defensive manner, or will they go out and have a go at Dublin? It's hard to know what the right way is, but I think if Dublin don't win this game fairly comfortably, there could be questions at. But I think Dublin, I'd say they'll definitely be in the semi-finals of the Leinster Championship come Saturday evening. But I think that this will be the game, maybe, like, whether they'll go out, they'll show their hand, they'll win by, like, Dublin can probably win this game, like, regardless of what systems they set up. Or it'll just be interesting to see how they line out, what tactics they use, and did they give much away. They probably didn't give too much away in the league. So look, I'd say Dublin, to be honest, Gerry, it's probably going to be straightforward enough for Dublin getting through Leinster again this year. So we mightn't really see Dublin under huge pressure maybe until the semi-final if they play Donegal, if those results materialise. But I'd say, this weekend it should be no problem for Dessie Farrell and his Dubs, unfortunately, for my own sake.
Okay, obviously, the Dubs, it's they're hard to beat for any county, and certainly in Leinster they haven't really been troubled as too much recently. So that game is on Saturday evening, 6:15. So they'll probably get a good audience on the TV and that for that one. So Sunday then the other 3 games in the Leinster Championship are on. So Longford beat Louth last week to set up a meeting with Laois. So how do you see that game going?
Yeah, it's funny, Gerry. I wouldn't really rate either of those teams, to be honest with you. I think that like Longford, they were very, very good before lockdown in the league, and since the lockdown, they haven't really played fantastic. Mickey Quinn is a big loss, and they're probably accounted. They always punch above their weight in the championship, and like, they'd be hard to beat. And I think they think they have a good chance to get into a semi-final this weekend. I just saw Laois against Fermanagh for a bit in that match, and they were very, very poor. They were absolutely blessed. Like, Fermanagh had nothing to play, and Fermanagh were comfortably a better team for most of the game. And like, it was the same when they played Westmeath the week before, and Westmeath had hockeyed them. So I just think that I don't know what I'd be. I think that match it's hard to know what level both teams are at. Like Longford always kind of punch well above their weight, and Laois, I think it's probably a game Laois might think they have to win because they were poor enough in the league and they'd like to probably start. At least have had a few all right underage teams, so they'd like to see themselves pushing themselves to the next level. But like, I find all the games in Leinster, the Leinster Championship hasn't been anywhere near as entertaining as the other three championships in recent years. I think it's nearly exclusively down to Dublin's dominance. So having a big feast of games in the Leinster Championship doesn't really appeal to people, really, to be honest. Like, like even these teams going to be knocked out. Like, there's going to be no real All-Ireland contender knocked out this week. They knocked out this weekend of the championship. So it's hard to. I'd say Longford D should be close. I'd say Longford will. I might just go with Longford shock there. I think Pierce Park is a bit of a force. I don't think these are going great. I think Longford might just have enough in them to get over the line. Now, Mickey Quinn is a big loss, but I think Laois have a player suspended who got sent off against Romana as well in the last round of the league. So I think I might just go for a shock with Longford, but I wouldn't. It's nearly impossible to call
They
that.
sure are one of them teams where like you're going back quite a few years now, but I used to always kind of predict that maybe that they could be a team that would be being an outsider for an All Ireland at one stage, because around the sort of time whenever like you had Tyrone and Armagh that were making big noises up here in Ulster, Laois always seemed to do really well underage, and I kind of thought that at some point that was going to come through, but then it never really did, and they never really got that far.
2007 or so, Laois haven't really been an absolutely fantastic team in the Leinster Championship. I think before that they kind of had very good underage teams for years, and then since maybe 2007, just things haven't really worked out for Laois, to be honest. I think 2006 maybe more so, but they were able to give Dublin a good game in Leinster finals, but it hasn't really worked for them. But they're coming out. Micheál Quirk is a good coach. It's hard though. I'd say probably Laois might have better players on paper, but they don't really click. They haven't really clicked. I think John Sugru was a big loss, a very good coach. But Micheál Quirk even is a good coach too. So it's hard to call it. I wouldn't be really expecting a classic game instead, but I think whoever wins that game will struggle in the end against Dublin. But I think anything's going to struggle against Dublin, really. So I don't. But I find that game, Gerry, it's hard enough to get excited about it. I find it hard to get excited about any of the other four Leinster games, but I think particularly the two, and that's the draw, because I don't think any of the three teams left are going to trouble Dublin, unfortunately. But I think the other side of the draw, maybe you've got Kildare, Meath, and Wicklow and Offaly, and any of those four teams have a realistic chance of getting to a Leinster final, which would be a novel. Well, for maybe not for Wicklow and Offaly, that would certainly be a very, very big feat to get to at this stage. But yeah, no, Longford maybe just to edge it, but I'm expecting a close game there in Buttersfield Park.
Okay, and so also at the same time of that game on Sunday, you've got Wicklow and Meath, so it'd be nice for Wicklow just to be playing somebody other than Wexford for a change. They seem to have went back to back there against them. So Meath are kind of one of the counties that you would sort of regard as being one of the big hitters in Leinster. So like, what sort of team do they have this year?
Yeah, just going back in Wicklow there, Gerry, they're probably a bit unlucky with the system this year, because they're a county but they have Mick O'Dwyer in there, and Mick did a great job. He's one of the real legendary figures of Gaelic football, but he was in Wicklow, and they always, I think as far if my memory serves me correct, they always did very, very well in the championship, and they had some unbelievable championship days with Mick, but they never really couldn't get out of Division 4 in the league, and I think that was probably a flaw for Wicklow for years. And then this year they have gotten out of Division 4, and I think those players for Wicklow would have deserved a crack at playing in Croke Park in a league final. So I think they're a bit unlucky they didn't get to play in a league final this year, but I think Davy Burke, the job he's done since coming in can't be underestimated. He's an excellent coach, is Davy Burke. He showed it with Kildare and with Sarsfield and now Wicklow. And I think they're playing Meath this weekend with absolutely nothing to lose in Aughrim. Now, Aughrim traditionally, it has a reputation for being a place where it's very, very hard for a team to go. It's kind of up in the Wicklow Mountains, it's a very hard spot. And they played Antrim down in Wicklow. I don't know was it in Aughrim, but they played Antrim in Wicklow a few weeks ago, and they absolutely humiliated
7 goals, yeah.
So Wicklow, that wasn't a fluke, Gerry, in the sense that Antrim aren't a bad team, but like Wicklow are going well, they have been, like Wexford have been going fairly well, and they're after beating them twice in the last 2 weeks. I think both games were in Wexford as well. So Wicklow are really a team that'll be interesting, because Meath are a step up from Antrim and Wexford. Now they're not. Meath have been playing in Division 1 this year. Both of those wins were in Division 4. So obviously you have the 3 divisions, but it's not probably as big as the gap might suggest. But like Meath are a team where last year they broke into the Super 8s and they broke into Division 1. Now they haven't really landed that heavyweight blow yet. And they didn't win a game in the Super 8s, and they didn't win any of their 7 games in Division 1. But what was crucial for me last year was they got to a Leinster final. They were back in the Leinster final. And I think that was important because probably the next step for them is to get to a Leinster finals maybe every year, and maybe establish that as the second best team in Leinster, and then eventually maybe try and establish that as the best team in Leinster. Now, that's obviously a lot easier said than done, but like this game is a banana skin for me this weekend down in Auckland. Now, I think Meath should have enough in them to get over the line with a small bit to spare, with maybe 5, 6, 7 points. But I'd be interested to see what level Wicklow are. I probably won't get to watch that game because it'll be clashing with other games, but I'd like to. It would be a game I'd be interested in watching. It would be that Meath Wicklow game, but I'm going to go for Meath probably just to win by a few points, but not by a cricket score by any means. I think Wicklow would give us them for large part, but I think if Meath and Kildare, I'd be interested to see how they get on. They're on the one side of the draw, so they've no excuses this year for not getting to a Leinster final. But Meath just to edge that game.
Okay. It's also interesting you mentioned about the National League and these two teams, and like probably if mentality plays anything into this, Wicklow will be feeling pretty good about themselves about finishing first I think they ended up finishing second in Division 4 with Limerick. I think it was pipped them at the end, but Meath obviously they went through Division 1. I don't think they won a match. I think they lost everything until they drew their last game. So it could be
they had done well. They didn't do bad in Division 1. Meath on the other hand, like they actually. Why they didn't win a game? They got a draw against Monaghan in the last round. They ran Dublin fairly close in Parnell Park. They ran Kerry fairly close down in Tralee. I think they only lost to Galway by a point. Mayo might have beaten them by a point as well. So while Meath didn't win a game in Division 1, they certainly made progress. But I think the way Davy Burke will tell it to this team, at the start of the year, this was a Division 1 versus a Division 4 game. But now it's really a Division 3 versus Division 2. And if anyone who knows would probably say that there's not much of a gap between Division 3 and Division 2. So all of a sudden, Wicklow have a bit of a card to play with and home advantage as well. So the odds probably have bounced. The ball has probably bounced in Wicklow's favour this weekend. And I think this is the type of game where if Andy McEntee, if they were playing Wicklow last year in Park Talton, they played Offaly and they won by a few points. And he probably might have said he was delighted, but he mightn't have been maybe delighted deep down, But I'd say this, if they came out of Auckland with a 1 point win this weekend, I'd say Andy McEntee would be absolutely relieved, to be honest.
Okay, and so the final game in Leinster this week, and it's an unusual throw-in time. 5:30 on Sunday. So it's Kildare against Offaly. My sort of memories, obviously both teams, have a decent size over sort of a few years back. Sort of most recent sort of would be Kildare. Obviously, I remember the game they played. I think it was down. In the All-Ireland semi-final, and I think it was McGeady maybe in charge at the time, and they hit the bar, I think, really late on with a free, and since then they've sort of seemed to have gone a wee bit sort of backwards. Obviously I'm not with the Ulster media, they're probably a bit less covered up here now, certainly since McGeady's not there as well. So how do you see that game going?
Yeah, I'm looking forward to this game as well, Gerry. I'm looking forward. I think this side of the draw is far more interesting than the other side of the draw because, at the moment, to be honest with you, but I just think Kildare, if you just think of Kildare, I'll just start with them before going to Offaly. The geezer, McGeady, did an absolutely fantastic job in Kildare, and I don't think it's been appreciated much how much he did and how forward-thinking McGeady actually was in Kildare. I think at the time, people in Kildare, I don't know where they're skeptical of him or what was it, because I just think that he just did an amazing job. They were the width of the crossbar away from the All-Ireland final, and a terrible refereeing decision that day. Benny Coulter admitted himself he was in the square in 2010. And in 2011, they lost to Dublin by a bad refereeing decision again, last minute free in Croke Park. But I just think that McGeady brought Kildare to new heights. And I think at the time, there was good underage in Kildare, but McGeady was looking after the underage, but people just thought that he might have been holding them back and maybe that they had someone else to push them over the next level. And they were unbelievably naive to think that, to be honest with you. But Jason Ryan went in after him. Ryan's a very good fella, but it didn't really work out for him. And Cian O'Neill then improved in the last years, but they probably couldn't get that bit of a breakthrough that they got to maybe O'Neill. It peaked for O'Neill in 2018 against Mayo when they bet them with the whole Newbridge or nowhere thing. So Cian O'Neill did a very good job across his 4 years, but this is the box office appointment in Kildare with Jack O'Connor. If you think of Jack O'Connor, if you're looking at the modern coaches, he's won 2 All-Irelands, or he's won 3 All-Irelands with Kerry. I think he won it in 04 and 06 and 09, and unlucky not to win more. Jack O'Connor is a very, very good coach. And I just think that there's no excuses now with Kildare. I think Jacko was actually linked with the job when Kieran McGeeney left at the time, I think. But I think he was involved in Moorfield a bit. His sons were playing for them, Keane and Aina O'Connor. So I think Jack O'Connor is a box office appointment, and he really, like, his record as a coach is excellent. I think he's very good in club level as well, in school level, and at underage level in Kerry. So Kildare have now got no excuses. They've good underage. They've got a good coach. They're on the opposite side of the draw to Dublin. They missed out in Division 1 narrowly. Now, I just think that, like, Offaly then, John Maughan is another good coach. It's real, a bit of a nostalgic feel for this game, Gerry, because Jack O'Connor and Maughan managed against each other in 2004 All-Ireland final. So they did, for Kerry and Mayo respectively, and Jacko really got the better of Maughan that day. So they did. Kerry bet Mayo fairly well that day, and they also bet them fairly well in 2006 when Jack O'Connor was in charge. But I think Mickey Moran was managing Mayo that day. So, like, I think that he's won. Like, there's no question in O'Connor's credentials at Kildare, but it is a young team, so, like, it's probably about time that they maybe delivered on the Leinster stage. In 2017, they got to the Leinster final, did fairly well against Dublin for large periods. They lost by 9 points in the end, but they were one of the only teams to get within 10 of Dublin and Leinster in recent years. And, like, they'd lost that qualifier to Armagh, and then they kind of lost. They lost to Carlow in the next year, Leinster, after losing all their matches in the league. So it was just probably one of those days for Kildare. They're just such a frustration team in that sense. They seem to have so much more in them. But Offaly then, Maughan has took them. They look like they could have got relegated to Division 3, Division 4, even the first year from Division 3. But they set up on the last day, beating Sligo away. But they were unlucky. They probably should have had more points. They should have had survival well secure before that. Then this year, they survived as well in Division 3. But I think Maughan is a very good coach. He doesn't take any messing in training. He has fit lads in there. He plays good attacking football, plays to win, sets teams up to have a crack at the opponents. They Offaly have become a lot more consistent since Maughan took over. They were very, very close to beating Clare to beating Meath in last year's championship, and look, I suppose it didn't really materialise for them on the day. They lost by 2 points, but then they lost to Leash in the qualifiers narrowly. But this should be a good game. I think Offaly are a small bit unlucky with injury at the moment, with a few lads not playing. But I think Kildare should get over the line in Portlaoise this weekend. They should get over. There's no guarantee at all. But I'd probably expect Kildare to come at the end of a hard battle. I'd say Offaly will stay in the game, Gerry, for 50, 55 minutes, and Kildare might just pull away. Kildare probably have a far better squad on paper than Offaly, but I think both Kildare and Meath, their challenge is, if that is the semi-final, their challenge, one of those teams has to be consistently the second best team in Leinster. They have to try and stop this rest of Leinster competition every year, where a novel team can get to the final. But both of those teams have to be second place to Dublin every year, and then maybe eventually try and become first place into Dublin. So the challenge is small. I think Kildare have probably a small bit better underage than Meath. I think Kildare and Meath are comfortably second and third in no particular order in Leinster at the moment, and I think Kildare, it's for both of those teams, it's important that they win their games this weekend and meet in the semi-final.
Okay, so we'll go down to Munster next, and the action starts on Saturday lunchtime again. I know Limerick and Tipperary didn't impress you in the hurling, but are you a bit more excited for the meeting in the football semi-finals here in Munster?
Well, I actually am, Gerry, because I think that this game is do or die, and well, the do or die is one thing. Every game is do or die in the football championship, but this is a Munster semi-final, and it gives both these teams a chance to get to a Munster final. And like both sides haven't been in too many Munster finals in recent years. I think Tip were in one in 2016, wasn't it, when they lost to Kerry? But they haven't really been in, like Limerick haven't been in it for a long time in a Munster final. And there was a time in the maybe the start of the last decade and maybe the end of the noughties when Limerick were consistently in Munster finals and they just couldn't get over the line. They lost by a point to Cork in 2009. They lost by 3 points to Kerry in 2010. And both those years, Limerick had a right good team with John Galvin and Ian Ryan and those lads. And then Limerick kind of went off the boil completely, Gerry. They did after that, and they weren't really a force in Munster. Now, Tipperary were in a final in 2016, a Munster final. Didn't work out for them on the day, but they had knocked Cork out of that Munster Championship, and then they went on to beat Gerry, I think, in the qualifiers and get to an Ireland quarter-final. Then they went on to beat Galway, humiliated Galway in Croke Park, and only lost to Mayo by a few points in an Ireland semi-final. So Tipperary back then had done very well underage, and they were only a kick of the ball or two away from being in an Ireland final against Dublin. Now, would they have won the final against Dublin? Absolutely no way. They wouldn't have lived with Dublin that day. But they were that team. It shows you there was always talent in Tip. Those players, I won't say they didn't go away. It was a young team. Some of them went to Australia, but they have a few of those lads back now. Was probably the main thing, Gerry. And it showed against Clare the last day. They were comfortable enough against Clare despite the 3-point winning margin. Now Clare didn't play well, but that's no real excuse. But Tip haven't really done well in the Munster Championship since that day in 2016 when they bet Cork. And like last year, Tip were absolute shoo-ins to beat Limerick. Limerick sunned them and they knocked them out of the Munster Championship. So there's no reason why Limerick mightn't do likewise this year. Limerick are certainly making progress, so they are. They won the McGrath Cup, the pre-season tournament. Okay, it was probably nothing major, but they won Division 4. They came top of the league in Division 4 and they played some good football. So Limerick are making progress. They bet Waterford off the pitch last weekend in Dungarvan. So there's absolutely no reason for Limerick to fear Tip this weekend. Now, who do I think will win the game? I think Tip might just have too much for them, but I think that, to be honest with you, Gerry, the hand on heart, I really think the Kerry or Cork will win a Munster final. I think the other game is probably the Munster final, but I think that I'm excited for it. It would mark significant progress if either of these teams was to get to a Munster final. Limerick more so than Tip, but like if Limerick will have had a great year, but if they win this, it will be a year from heaven for Billy Lee's side. But if Tip win, the pressure is on Tip, Gerry, this weekend. They lost to Limerick last year. They want to prove it's no fluke. It'll be a big setback if they lose this weekend, but the pressure is on Tipperary. But I'd say they might just get over the line, but they definitely have to work for it this week to work for it if they do get over the line.
Okay, and no doubt one of the games of the weekend, exactly as you'd want it. Like the two teams, that will traditionally be the big powers in Munster. They're playing knockout football here. The only thing missing really is the atmosphere, obviously, or the situation that we're in. But Cork and Kerry, 4:00 on Sunday. Obviously, Kerry will come into that game as favourites, and they obviously performed very well in the National League. But Cork are obviously, it's when they see the green and gold on the opposite end, they're going to certainly raise their game too. So how do you think that one will go?
Yeah, I'm really looking forward to this game, Gerry. I think it's definitely the game of the weekend. Cork and Kerry in a knockout battle. I think I can remember, well, it's not that long ago. I can remember 2009 very well, the All-Ireland final. I think 2007 was the final as well, and in 2008 it was semi-final. So we can remember these teams having titanic battles in Croke Park. Now, what I don't remember, Gerry, and this will absolutely irritate Cork, I don't remember Cork winning those games. I remember Cork used to have no problem beating Kerry in Munster finals, in Munster Championship. There was a very good record. They couldn't get over the line against Kerry in All-Ireland in the semi-finals and finals. Now, the year Cork won the All-Ireland, they bet Down had bet Kerry, so they still didn't beat Kerry that year. And they had Kerry beaten off the park a few times in those years. But Kerry always had too much for Cork in All-Ireland finals. In my time now, that's only since maybe 2006 or so. But before that, in the Cork, we're often like, Cork have a very bad record against Kerry in knockout football, Gerry, purely in the last years. But maybe before that, back before maybe 2000, every game was knockout. So if Cork bet Kerry and Munster, it was a knockout game, and these games were common. So they were having Cork and Kerry in knockout games. But I think those records, but I don't think maybe what happened 11 or 12 years ago, that means nothing at all. But what does mean something is Kerry are going for, is it 8 or 9 Munster titles in a row? I think it's 8 titles in a row Kerry are going for a Munster. That means a lot now, because this Kerry team certainly has had Cork's number over recent years. Now, I actually think that Dublin and Kerry, I would have said maybe are slightly ahead of rest, and maybe Donegal. Cork could easily be in the 4th, 5th place team. I think they're a far better team than they're given credit for. I think halfway through last year's league, they had 1 point from their first 4 games, and they were all but relegated. And there was kind of a bit of a turning point then. They played Tipperary away, won that game. They played Donegal the next day. They lost by a few points at home, but they put in a very good display. They went up to Armagh then, bet Armagh in, I think it was in Athletic grounds or in Crossing-Glen, but they won that game. And then suddenly, okay, although they got relegated to Division 3, their whole season had turned. They hammered Limerick in the Munster semi-final. They went and they ran Kerry very close in last year's Munster final, and they gave Dublin and Tyrone very good games in the Super 8s. Now, Cork's target this year was to win the league. They won the league. They won 6 games and got a walkover and won. So they've done nothing wrong so far this year. A bit like Westmeath, their main target this year was to get out of Division 3. They've got out of Division 3. I'd say they would have been hoping when they had Kerry in the first round, they were probably looking for a backdoor maybe to get into the Super 8s if they did lose this game. But the fact there's no Super 8s means this is do or die for both teams. Now, I really fancy Kerry to win the All-Ireland, Gerry, but I think if they're going to get stopped, this could be the game to stop them. I think that I actually, if Kerry win this game I put this will be a harder game than what they're going to meet against Connacht champions in the All-Ireland semi-final, to be honest with you. I think that, and likewise, I think if Cork can win this game, they'll get to an All-Ireland final and they'll have a right chance of winning. I think if Cork they're 40-1 or so for the All-Ireland one. I think if Cork can actually get over the line here, they could be very, very, very close to winning the All-Ireland. I think that not only will they have been in the Munster final and favourites to win it, but they'll have knocked out a big powerhouse. They'll have knocked out most people's favourites. So I think this is a massive game for both teams. Cork have every chance, but I think Kerry are just they have such good players around the park. They have Clifford, Sean O'Shea, David Moore, and Paul Ganey be playing as well. Shane Ryan's a very good goalkeeper. Paul Murphy, Stephen O'Brien, Peter Crowley. I just think the Kerry team has just so much talent. I think we actually, Gerry, could be seeing a team who are about to dominate Gaelic football for the foreseeable future in this Kerry team. And I just think that they'll make no mistakes against Cork. But Cork's record against Kerry and Porky Queeve is not bad. But I think I'm just going to go for Kerry. Cork won the All-Ireland under-20 and minor last year. There's players coming through in Cork for definite. So I think that both of these teams, though, could be two real powerhouses in region. Kerry already are a powerhouse, but I think Cork are a coming team and a team definitely to watch in the next 2 or 3 years. But I just think Kerry might have too much for them this weekend.
Okay, so on to Connacht, where obviously we were supposed to have 2 games this weekend. COVID has stuck its ugly nose in again, and Galway and Sligo. Sligo have had to withdraw from the game, so Galway have got a walkover into the final of Connacht. What do you think? Do you think that's like a big advantage, or well, how do you see that playing out in the long term?
I think, Gerry, this is actually the time where both sides have really not benefited from this. I think now, for a start, I'll go on Sligo in a second, but it's very, very bad for Galway. They were absolutely flying it before lockdown. They had it humiliated against Mayo. It wouldn't have done them any good. They lost to Dublin at home in a dead rubber game in the last round. But I think that this could have been the game against Sligo. They could have won by a fairly big score, and it could have built their confidence ahead of a Connacht final. They could have really given them a boost. And that game is gone now. So they're coming into a Connacht final off 2 losses and not having played particularly well in either of those games. So it's going to be very hard for Galway to kind of coming in cold in the Connacht final. Now, the thing with Sligo is what I don't understand, Gerry, is how they couldn't get 15 lads to play for Sligo. Now, this is where I'm a bit confused. Is there a rule that stops players coming in? Because I know that, like, I don't know now, I hope this never happens for Westmeath's point of view, but I know if Westmeath were in that situation, I'd volunteer to play myself in hurling and football rather than see them have a walkover. Now, hopefully for Westmeath, I wouldn't like to be going Mark and Conor O'Callaghan this weekend against Dublin, but I just think surely you get 15 club players in Sligo to play this match. Now there's this whole thing of whether they'll be hammered. Now they probably weren't going to win the game anyway, so now I'm a bit confused. To be fair, there could be more going on behind things. Maybe you have to submit a squad of players or whatever, but I think that if they could, that certainly they would have got 15 players willing to play for Sligo this weekend. So I'm disappointed that they gave a walkover, but look, it's understandable in the current circumstances how these things are going to happen. But look, but what do you think, Gerry? Do you think that they could have put in 15 lads? Would that have been the right thing to do to get any players in Sligo?
Well, sort of just before I answer that, obviously, I think you were doing yourself a disservice there, saying you wouldn't fancy playing the Dubs. As I was reading in the internet earlier about Conor McKenna winning Footballer of the Month. That wasn't you, No,
it's this different fella. That is, no.
Right. But no, seriously, I think the answer to the question, from reading the comments, and I know obviously the amateur ethos, but I think almost it's almost a wee bit like a professional pride comes in, where like Sligo, it seemed to me like their kind of comments were that they had like whatever it was, I think it was 32 lads and whatever coaches, and we've been working all this length of time and that length of time, and I think sort of the where it seemed to be that they were coming from was they were looking at it as we've put all this work in, so we don't want to undervalue the players that put the work in by just bringing in 15 random fellas. I think for just even out of respect for your opponent, sometimes let them get the game. Like I've seen times where stuff's happened and it's obviously not at the same levels, but like just sort of like random football matches and like maybe a referee doesn't show up or something, and the two teams will agree to play like a wee sort of like a friendly or something, But I don't know. As you say, there might be a rule that stopped it, but it's just another reason, why just this COVID's just kind of ruining a good thing in many ways.
Yeah, but I don't know where they hope maybe for a postponement or something, and had they maybe not got one. It's disappointing. I think that to be fair to Sligo, it's a pity there wasn't maybe more of a fight put up by people to maybe get postponed. Now maybe there's clear rules in place, but maybe it's the GPA could have maybe been involved a small bit more or whatever, because it's not really fair in those players. Now, the only thing, if there was 8 or 9 lads missed, I think that's what I heard was the figure of lads unavailable to play. But then, like, there's a panel of how many, like, even if they had to play, like, if there's a panel of 30 players, then if it's 8 or 9, you still have 21 lads and maybe call in a few more lads as subs. I don't know, Gerry. I'd be a bit disappointed if Sligo, if there was nothing stopping them feeding, to be honest with you. But look, they have their own reasons. Okay, they can say they weren't going to win, but they probably weren't going to beat Galway anyway, like the odds were going to be against them. Like, so I just think that I'd be a small bit disappointed, but look, it's not the end of the world. It's actually ironic, because Sligo hurlers didn't field against Derry in the first round of Christy Ring with similar issues with COVID. So look, I suppose in the times we're in, these issues are going to come. But I suppose the big difference between this and the other ones is that the teams now are out of the championship now. The other ones, there was a backdoor, and Sligo hurled it in this weekend. But look, Sligo have their reasons. Paul Taylor, the manager, he sounded disappointed that they couldn't play. He's a good person. I know the Sligo lads, I wouldn't question their commitment or anything like that at all. I just, maybe if they could have got lads, if they could have found a way to maybe field the team, I personally would have gone with that approach. But look, it's not yet. It's over now. But I think just going back and that, just to move on, I think Galway won't be happy not to have a game going into a kind of final.
Mm-hmm. Especially as you say, the way that the return of the league kind of worked out for them wasn't ideal. But from that disappointment, obviously outside of Cork and Kerry, for me, just scanning over the fixtures and stuff this weekend, certainly in terms of football, the very clear second best for me is Roscommon and Mayo. I think that is potential to be a great game. It's Sunday lunchtime, so a good time for it to be on as well. So what way do you see it working out?
Well, just Gerry, to go back on that point, if anyone's given out about lockdown, if you can't find yourself sitting on the couch enjoying Mayo and Roscommon and Kerry and Cork on Sunday, well then it's hard to have much sympathy for you. It's like if people found out about Donegal and Tyrone last week, I just think that that game was just like these two games, high intensity. Like, Mayo Roscommon, I don't think we're a stretch. Same with Kerry and Cork, I don't think it's a stretch that these two are All-Ireland Championship contenders, the two teams, and Mayo and Roscommon. I think Mayo, like if you said Mayo were All-Ireland contenders, nobody would disagree with you. If you said Roscommon, people might, but Roscommon have won 2 Connachts. They're in Division 1 now again. I put it, they're definitely contenders to get to an All-Ireland final, and maybe it could be the year that the Roscommon might get over the line. Like, you never know. Like, Roscommon have improved an awful lot in recent years. They have a very, very forward-thinking administrators in the county, it seems to be, because they've had good underage teams and they've appointed good coaches. Like Kevin McStay did a very good job in his 3 years there from 2016 to 2018. And Anthony Cunningham seemed to improve the team again to a new level. So I just think Roscommon, their appointments make sense. The players there, Conor Cox came in last year from Kerry, was a big addition. Like, Roscommon have players all around the pitch who are good. Like, I think what probably hasn't been said is that Roscommon bet Cavan in Breffni Park without 7 or 8 lads in the last round of the league, and Cavan did have to win that game. So, like, Roscommon have, they definitely have potential to be a very good, very very good side. Have Roscommon. I just think that, like, they've won 2 Connachts in a row, or they've won 2 Connachts in the last 3 years. They'd love to win 2 in a row. They bet Mayo and Castlebar last year, and Mayo did not play bad in the day. Mayo probably slightly unlucky to lose that match. It was 17 points to 212 Roscommon scored. So I think Mayo, they would have been actually very, very pleased, Gerry, to get the game against Leitrim last week, while Roscommon didn't have a game. Like, Roscommon had their 2 league games, but in one of those games they had a lot of players unavailable. Like, so Mayo have had 3. I'd actually say Mayo have had 3 championship games in the last 3 weeks. And since it's 2 league games, they had to win the both of them to survive, and they didn't win the both of them. They lost to Tyrone and they bet Galway fairly comfortably. But I'd say Mayo could argue they've had 3 good performances in the last 3 games, and they seem to have learned a lot. And I think, Gerry, that in the Tyrone game, Mayo kind of set up as they were going to set up for the championship. They didn't really set up to win that match necessarily, as stupid as that sounds. They kind of set up to set themselves up for the championship, that kind of way. So they played against Leitrim last week. It was a bit of a banana skin in Park. Sean McDermott there in Carrigan and Shannon, and they got over the line. They didn't start too well, but they got over the line. They would have been secretly delighted with an 11-point win against Leitrim. They're playing Roscommon this week. Now, Mayo haven't been in a Connacht final in 5 years, which is mad to believe, especially if they've been in 2 All-Ireland finals in the interim period. So if I had to call it this week, I think Mayo might get over the line. I think Mayo will end their bad Connacht 2-2 in recent years. I'm going to go for Mayo just about, but only after a forensic test against Roscommon. I think Roscommon really put it up to them. I think Roscommon, this is a big game. Roscommon and Mayo probably are slightly ahead of Galway at the moment, I'd nearly argue, in terms of what level they're at. So I think Mayo will just about have enough to win this game at the weekend.
Okay, and so we will Ulster then is the last 2 fixtures are from. So Saturday afternoon, Cavan obviously coming off the back of the very good win against Monaghan last weekend was a brilliant game. Take on Antrim. It's at Breffni Park. So do you see Antrim? Can Antrim land a glove on them, or like sort of from an Antrim perspective? I'm looking at the game and thinking the last time Antrim got a good run in Ulster and got to the final, they did beat Cavan.
Yeah.
And I'm just kind of thinking, that maybe sometimes after a big win comes a bit of a fall, but that's just me hoping rather than predicting. And
Gerry, I'm going to just start. Like, Antrim are again one of those teams where the league was probably their championship this year, and Antrim's sole objective would have been to get promoted from Division 4, and let's be honest, they didn't succeed in that ultimate. So I think it's been a bad year for Antrim, even if they beat Cavan this weekend, because I just think that for a county like Antrim, you need to be in Division 3. They've got a bit of a potential as a county with a big city there and a bit of a base in County Antrim, but I think you need to be at a bit of a higher level to maybe expose that and get the interest going in the county. So I think Antrim will be very, very disappointed from that perspective. Now, the next part is Cavan this weekend. Now, I think if you ask Lenny Harbinson what team out of the 8 teams he would have wanted to play in the Ulster Championship, he might have gone with Cavan and Gerry. And that's not being disrespectful, because Cavan were in an Ulster final last year and they're a good team. But I don't think Antrim would fear Cavan at all, to be honest. I just think that maybe Fermanagh Cavan would have been probably the team he would have gone for. Now, to be honest, if you asked any the Ulster teams they might want to play, I'd say Mickey Graham is saying he might want to play Antrim in this round as well. It probably works both ways. That's not being disrespectful to either team. It's probably just the way these are thinking with recent records in Ulster. But Cavan are kind of an unknown quantity, because they were relegated in the league. They seem to have lads missing, and then they came back and they bet Monaghan last weekend. And it's pure typical of Cavan. But I think Cavan are one of those counties where they kind of play on confidence. They seem to put a run of wins together and then a run of losses together, that kind of way. So I think the confidence of the Monaghan game, I think if this game was up in Corrigan Park or in Port Glenone or in one of those grounds in Antrim would have had a real chance, because even if there was no fans driving, it's a bad enough road from Cavan to Antrim. It is, like, even that sort of thing, the preparation, Antrim would have been there. I think the fact it's in Breffni Park, Cavan with the experience of beating Monaghan in Clones last week, their confidence might just see them over the line. But look, it's been a bad year for both teams, Gerry. That's not beat around the bush. Even for Cavan, okay, fair enough, they have knocked out Monaghan, so people can say, how can it be a bad year? But they got down from Division 1. They would have hoped to get back up. Now they're in Division 3, so it has been a bad year. The bad year, it might be, like, the only way I see that they could probably save that year is if they can win an Ulster Championship, And like Cavan, will they win an Ulster Championship? It's probably unlikely, but they feel they have a great chance to get into the final. They got to a final last year, and like, you can say what you want, but they get to 2 Ulster finals, and if they get to 2 finals in a row in the most competitive province, it's not bad going by any means. But it's funny because there's 4 teams left in the side of the draw in Down, Fermanagh, which we'll touch on in a second, and Cavan and Antrim, and 3 of those 4 teams have been in Ulster finals in the last 3 years. In Down were there in 2017. Fermanagh were there in 2018, and Cavan were there in 2019. And the common denominator, Gerry, is that neither of any of them did any well in this fight. There were one-sided games. It wasn't good games, and we had a period before that where there were good Ulster finals nearly every year. One of those teams, or Antrim, one of those 4 are going to be in a final again this year. Now, people would say Antrim are probably the least likely out of those 4 teams to get to a final, but I hope for the sake of the competition that if any of the other teams get up to a final, that we see a better game than we did in the last couple of years. So it's actually ironic in that sense, because like, people will probably say Derry and Armagh, they haven't been in Ulster finals in recent years, and all the rest of them have. So I just think that Cavan, though, just going back to what we were talking about, I think Cavan should get over Antrim this weekend, but I'd give Antrim a fighting chance there. I think Antrim Antrim played Tyrone last year, and they probably had no chance in honesty. But I think against Cavan, they do have a bit of a chance this week. I'd say Cavan to win maybe by 6 or 7. I'd say, but I'd say Antrim will will put it up to maybe. I'd say definitely for the first half, Antrim put it up to them. I think the Waterford game, it was good for Antrim that they got that game under their belt against Waterford. Kind of what we were saying about Galway there. They didn't really get a game under their belt, but Antrim were after getting the game under their belt against Waterford. They got a morale-boosting victory. I think if Antrim had gone into this on the back of an absolute hammering away in Wicklow, it would have been a very, very bad way to go into it. But they got the win against Waterford. Lenny Harpenson is a shrewd coach. He's a good tactics as well, and he's a good man. He's two things about Harpenson. He's very good at motivating players and getting them to play, and also he's a very, very good man to set up a team. So I think Antrim will go into this game prepared, and I'd be very, very surprised if they rolled over against Cavan.
Okay, and then to touch on the final game in the Ulster Championship, Sunday lunchtime again. It's Fermanagh against Down. As you say, like sort of traditionally looking at that game, most people would probably look at, you know, Down's got a far bigger sort of tradition and had more success. Obviously, you know, apart from that that All Ireland final appearance that we were talking about earlier, you know, they haven't really been too deep too often in recent years, but they'll probably be favourites for that one. But what do you think? Do you see Fermanagh putting the game up to Down, or do you think Down will be too strong?
Well, just actually in the early part of the noughties, Gerry, Fermanagh were very, very nearly in another final in 2004. I think Mayo bet them after replay. It was actually that year we're talking about with Jack O'Connor and John Maughan meeting in the final. But actually that year, it could have easily been a Westmeath and Fermanagh All-Ireland final that year. Westmeath had won their only Leinster title that year, and Fermanagh had a good team around 02, 03, 04. And like Fermanagh, like Rory Gallagher did a very good job. They got to the Ulster final, and the football wasn't the most attractive, but they were getting results like they were. Like, and this year would have been a bit of a setback getting relegated. I suppose again, Fermanagh, Gerry, it was probably just, as I keep saying, both of these teams have probably already played their championship. They'd argue, like Fermanagh had one aspiration, which was to stay in Division 2. They didn't really succeed. That Down had one target at the start of the year, which was to stay in, which was to get promoted from Division 3 to Division 2, and they managed to achieve that. Like, so Down are another county, huge football tradition. Clubs in Down are run good. There's good players in Down, but again, they need to be at Division 2 every year, that level of standard. And I think Down aren't good enough to stay at that level. But if you look at Down, okay, they've got the Ireland final in 2010, and they won't probably like to hear this, but they've done absolutely nothing since really of note in the championship. They haven't really cut. I wouldn't say they've caused a scab, but they bet Monaghan one year in Ulster, but they haven't really caused a knockout blow maybe in the years since 2010. And like 2010, like every day it becomes a day further. It's getting further away all the time. Like it's 10 years, it's a decade ago at this stage, really. Gerry, is 2010. Like, but like just this game this weekend, like if you look at it, Down probably, like they got promoted to Division 3. They did very, very good work back in February and March and January before the lockdown. They had a very, very good campaign. But then they actually got promoted this year without kicking a ball because Leitrim conceded, and then after Longford conceded against Cork, Down were mathematically through anyway. They lost the game against Louth. They didn't really put out a full team. I was surprised they didn't put out a full team there, Gerry, even though they were already promoted, because that was a chance pre-championship to get a bit of a workout in. Now, if you look at it from a Fermanagh point of view, they had a very, very bad spell back in February and March, but they've put up two good performances since the lockdown. Now, going to Clare, they were 18 lads who were going to have to self-fight. I think they only had to come out of isolation on the morning of the game. So Fermanagh really put up a spirited display there. And against Laois, they were ahead of Laois the whole match, but they had nothing to play for. And Laois probably wanted it a small bit more, and you could probably see that towards the final stage when the game was in the melting pot. Laois grabbed the bull by the horns and won the game. But like, Fermanagh have definitely not been bad since lockdown. Now, I'd say Down probably are slightly a better team. Seamus Quigley's a big loss for Fermanagh, and Sean Quigley, the two Quigleys. But it's hard to know how this game is going to go. I just think that like Fermanagh will see this as having an absolutely super chance of getting to another Ulster final. They got there in 2018, and they didn't do themselves justice at all on the day. They didn't. Now, they'd love to get another crack at Ulster. Now, I don't think they'd win an Ulster final, but like, they'd love to get over Down this weekend. Now, Down are the type, they didn't do themselves justice in 2017 at all. And Down have talent. There's no doubt Down have talent. Kilcoo showed that last year. There's a few clubs in Down who are quite strong. I was up there actually at a few games in Down this year. I saw Carrie Duff look very good, and like Kilcoo are a good team, Byrne are a good team, Warren Point are a good team, and there's more than that. Like the clubs, Breda are coming in. But Down actually off the pitch are in a very good. Well, off the pitch is a sense they seem to have a lot of clubs doing very well, and normally when that happens, it leads to a good inter-county team at senior football level. But that game this weekend in Brewster Park, I think in normal times, if we had a packed out Enniskillen, it's an absolutely huge asset for Fermanagh. They have a great record in Brewster Park. That's not there at the moment. I just think that Down might do enough to win that game and get to Ulster semi-final. But that side of the draw in Ulster, similar to Leinster with Kildare, it's really open this year, and all of those teams have a chance to get into Ulster final. And it's not actually a novel because they've all been there, as I mentioned, but they'll all have one common denominator, and Antrim included. You could say Antrim even back in 2009 because there's a lot of those players still there. The last time any of those 4 teams were in Ulster finals, they didn't do themselves justice at all. And they, like, whoever gets to an Ulster final this year, they'd love to change that. But if I had to call it, Gerry, I'm going to go for Down in that game, just about marginally.
Okay. Obviously, as you say, the fact that these teams, every one of them, will probably look at it and think, like, whenever you look at the teams in Ulster, like, obviously, straight away it feels like Donegal and Tyrone, and I would have said Monaghan, were on a level above any of these other sort of counties, and then they're looking at that, and none of those are in that half of the draw. So there's a big opportunity for somebody to get to a final, and unfortunately, obviously, with the year it's not going to be the big day out that it might have normally been. But it's still the way things are. You get to your provincial final. You're only three wins away from the title. It could be very certainly something. So if something unusual is going to happen, it's going to happen this year.
Like, the reason that those 3 teams have been in the last 3 finals is because the scalp they've taken has been Monaghan. So Monaghan now, Fermanagh, to be fair, scalped. Well, Cavan and Fermanagh both bet Monaghan and Armagh, which is nothing to be sneezed at whatsoever. But this year, I suppose they can get to the Ulster final without taking a massive scalp. And Cavan have already beaten Monaghan, to be fair, but Down and Fermanagh and Antrim can get to the final without maybe taking a huge scalp. So they could get to the final, and you'd have it with the year that's in it. If it's a wet day, they might have a fight or chance of in the final, But I think Down and Fermanagh, there'd be no reason for them to fear Donegal or Armagh. So I think this year they'll secretly. I put it this way: they're in a far happier position than if you look at someone like a team like Gerry, they were on the same side of the draw as Armagh, Donegal, and Tyrone. So it was always going to be hard for them, but it's not really the case with Fermanagh and Down at the moment, But look, and Cavan and Antrim. So I'm looking forward to this weekend.
Okay, well that's everything for the football side of things. So what we'll do is we'll take a short break now for a minute, and we'll be back on the stream. I'll load up the hurling conversation. There's not a massive program of games this weekend, but we'll have a quick run through them and get Conor's thoughts and opinions on what might happen. So, thanks again to Conor for joining me. And as I say, we'll be back in a couple of minutes, just as long as it takes me to type in the title and get ourselves back online. So, thanks for watching, and we'll be back again soon.